All right. So namaste. This is Michelle Skaletski-Boyd, and we're doing another SoulFelt series for the Messengers of Miracles. And this is volume 3. And I want to just say thank you for being here. And I also want to officially welcome our guest. So our guest today is Tom Zuba. And Tom, you have over 20 years that you've been learning to live with the deaths of all three, your daughter, your wife, and your son. And all of them died at different times under different circumstances. So now, as a life coach, author, and speaker, your mission is to teach people all over the world a new way to do grief. And you've done this by sharing not only so much of yourself and your own experiences, but also through your transformational collection, which I love. I just checked out your shop. I didn't realize you were doing journals. That's beautiful. You have a transformational collection, not only of journals, but of books. Your book, Permission to Mourn, which I absolutely loved. And right around the time that you were writing it is when we met. And now you have a new book, Becoming Radiant. So I asked you to be part of the series, not only because you and I have had this beautiful connection since we first met in person. I think it was in Portland, if I'm remembering correctly, but also because right now, as we talked about a little bit before we officially began the call, people are grieving right now for all kinds of reasons. And some people are aware of their grief. But I really feel like most people aren't aware that what they're feeling is grief. And who better than you to talk about that? And so what I wanted to do is to kind of start out with you sharing a little bit more about your story, and then leading and segueing into how grief usually expresses itself, and why now more than ever, we can be expressing it in a new way for an optimal way of living. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really, really happy to be here. When I reflect back on my life, my first, what I call, experience with a really intimate death occurred when I was 6 years old. My little brother, Daniel Patrick, died the day after his baptism. And my parents have given me wonderful, wonderful gifts. But one of the gifts they gave me, this was in 1963, which was a long time ago. But one of the gifts they gave me is we talked about my brother Danny all the time. We celebrated his birthday. I have 7 brothers and sisters. I have always been and will always be one of 8 siblings. So really, my parents, I would say, introduced me to a new way to do this. So many families, particularly then, but also now, when someone we love dies, that person is often never spoken of again. That person is put in a box, wrapped up tightly, and in the bottom drawer somewhere. So that was my first experience. And interestingly, even though I knew firsthand that children could die, it never, ever, ever occurred to me that one of my children would die. It was not on my radar screen. I've heard so many people, particularly moms, say, that my biggest fear is that my child might die. Never occurred to me. And in 1990, my 18-month-old daughter, Erin, died really, really suddenly. And I was thrust into the deepest, darkest, seemingly bottomless, hopeless pit of despair. It's one of those things I think that unless or until you've been there, no one can really appropriately describe what that is like for you. My wife and I had 2 sons following Erin's death. And I would say we came to what I would call a new normal. I know some people don't like that term, but I do. I mean, I was grateful. to arrive at a new normal. And after Christmas of 98, my kids were 3 and 7. I ended up calling 911 in the middle of the night and rode in an ambulance with my wife to the emergency room. And after about a 2.5-day stay, she died. So my 43-year-old wife died really, really suddenly. She died on New Year's Day of 99, which I thought was interesting. But even more interesting to me was that the next day, January 2nd, would have been our daughter's 10th birthday had she lived. So the awareness of those two things, I would say it cracked me open. And I started thinking, I'm not sure that this was random. I think there's something bigger going on here. And what I said to myself is, I want to be surrounded by people that are wiser than me. I don't want to waste this experience, but I want to be surrounded by people that are wiser than me. I kid you not, 4 months later, I'm sitting with the best-selling author, Gary Zukav, who is one of my greatest teachers. He wrote the book, The Seat of the Soul, and I'm a guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show. That registered with me. I mean, I was like, I asked and I received. However, I was in that deep, dark hole. I mean, I don't want to minimize the pain and the darkness. And I, clawed my way out. I clawed my way out. And we did find what I call a new normal again. And remarkably, unbelievably, 2 days after my 13-year-old son had started 7th grade, something happened in the middle of the night, and I wasn't sure if it was a stroke or a seizure. And for the second time, I'm in an ambulance, going to the emergency room with someone I really, really love. And after about 2 months, he was diagnosed with a terminal brain cancer. He had a glioblastoma. So I listened to the doctors, and they said to me, there is no hope, but we want to do chemo and radiation. And I remember thinking, this is my 3rd time around. And if you tell me there's no hope, I believe you. I'm going to look for people that believe there is hope, because I wanted to do everything I possibly could to save this kid. Not so much for him. I want to be really, really clear. Rory, when he was in his physical body, was a fascinating human being. He was a genius, scored in the 99th percentile on the Stanford Nines. I was fascinated by him. And I knew that if he left his body, his adventure would continue. He was fascinated by time travel and black holes and parallel universes. I mean, accompanying him on the planet was, like we were at Disney every single day. So I want to be clear. I knew he would be fine. I wasn't going to try to keep him here for him. It was for me, because I just thought, I cannot do this grief thing again. I can't do this grief thing again. So I did everything I possibly could, literally. I mean, I took him to Seattle and Houston. We did Reiki, cranial sacral therapy. We had ashes from India, holy water from Medjugorje, from Lourdes. I don't know if people are familiar with John of God, but friends of mine presented photos to John of God. I was raised Catholic. I let the Catholic priest into my house and anoint him, singing bowls, chanting, everything. And the kid died anyway. He died anyway. And the gift of that was, I could not keep him alive. He died in the perfect way at the perfect time. I firmly, firmly, firmly believe that. So I was once again thrust in this deep, dark, seemingly bottomless pit of despair. And I said to myself, if I can crawl my way out, if I can crawl my way out one more time, I'm going to use my life to help other people. I'm going to try to offer them the tools and the resources and the information so that their journey won't have to be as difficult as mine. Then there's one more interesting thing that happened. My father, when he was alive, was my biggest fan. As he got older, not so much, when I was a teenager or when I was in my 20s or my 30s, but as we both got older, he was so proud of me. And he would tell me every time I saw him, you are doing such important work. You are doing such important work. Well, he died a year ago, April 8th. And I got to accompany him those last 2 weeks, almost 24/7. And he had the most peaceful, peaceful, beautiful death. I had never experienced that before, never. So among many gifts he gave me, this understanding that there are many ways to leave our physical body. And he had an absolutely beautiful way. So I consider myself a student of grief. And one of the things that I've noticed is that so many of us believe, because we were taught and we don't really think about it, is that somehow, some way, grief is the enemy, that grief is to be avoided at all cost. For me, grief has been my greatest teacher. And the way I define grief is the end of a dream. We all experience grief every single day. I mean, I somewhat jokingly, but seriously say, as a little child, if your mom had 3 suckers and offered them to you and your 2 siblings, and you really wanted the red one, but Jimmy took the red one and you're stuck with the yellow one, you experience something inside of you. That's grief. Grief is what happens inside of us when something we hoped would happen, something we wanted to happen, something we believed would happen, doesn't happen. Everybody experiences grief. And when we talk about it, this is where I differ a little bit with a lot of folks out there. It probably comes down to semantics, but we have so much more in common in our grief than we realize it. And when we bring it up and out into the light, we realize that. So everybody grieves. This is where the difference is. What do we do with that grief? So many of us have been taught to suppress it, repress it, shove it down, be strong, put on a happy face. That will eat us alive. In order to heal, we have to mourn. And mourning is simply and very complexly identifying what's happening inside of us and getting it up and getting it out, up and out, up and out. And I agree with you completely, Michelle, that today there is so much to mourn. There are so many dreams that have ended, are in the process of ending, or will end. And that does not have to be a bad thing. What we are experiencing is transforming us. And we will either consciously participate in that transformation, or it will happen on a subconscious level. And that's the beauty of the conversation today. We want to shine a light on it so that we can all consciously participate in this transformation.
Yeah, for sure. As I was listening to your story, and I remember I was in your audience in Portland for that afterlife event. And I remember hearing your story then, and I remember tearing up then. And, you know, it's like you bring me into it. And I remember one of the things that you told the audience at that time was it was so important to say their name. And I remember as you were telling your story, how you said their name. And you reminded me about your brother, Daniel, which I had forgotten about. And, you know, I took that gift that you gave me that day, and I remember sharing it with other people and giving them permission to not feel like they had to be shameful, because shameful and grief oftentimes go hand in hand. You know, we feel shame like we're not supposed to even say the person's name. And I think, you know, my own experience, everybody's got to go with their own truth, but not only is this happening when we lose a loved one, but it feels like there's people that are feeling a little bit ashamed to be honest about their feelings right now. And that vulnerability piece is what allows us to heal. It is what allows us to transform. And it is what allows other people to witness us where we are, so that new rebirth can take place. Now, this is a very simple example, but I woke up this morning, and last night when I watched the weather, they had said it was going to be nice and sunny. So I expected a nice sunrise today, and it was cloudy. It wasn't sunny. And so my expectation was kind of a downer. And it's like that example you gave with the little kids, right? It was like, I could feel this little sadness, this little grief. And on a huge scale right now, whether it's somebody's graduation or somebody's wedding or somebody's funeral, this is not how we thought things were going to be. It's not what we expected things to be. And yet I hear you say this is a good opportunity for transformation. So can you help us understand why that is? Because right now it doesn't feel that way.
So Albert Einstein said one of the most important decisions we will ever make is, do we live in a friendly universe or do we live in a hostile universe? Byron Katie, who is a great teacher of mine, said, is life happening to us or is life happening for us? The only person that can answer those two questions for me is me. And when I say I'm living in a hostile universe, Zuba, it's hostile. Are you not paying attention? And when I say life is happening to me, my daughter's dead, my wife's dead, my son's dead. I'm playing with you, but I can feel the energy of those words and those beliefs in my body. When I came to a point where I felt I've suffered enough, I've suffered enough, I realized that I could choose a path of peace or a path of pain. That was my choice. And it wouldn't be a choice I would make once. It would be a choice I would make this morning when I was so looking forward to the sun shining. It's cloudy and rainy here too. And you know what? It's supposed to be cloudy and rainy here like for the next 2 months. It's like, So what we do is we tell ourselves stories. We tell ourselves so many stories about what's happening. And 99.9% of those stories are made up. So when I'm vulnerable, like you said, when you're vulnerable, you give me permission to be vulnerable. When I'm vulnerable, I give the next person permission to be vulnerable. But when we're vulnerable and we really sit with our feelings, we can name that feeling and we can dive even deeper and we can uncover the belief that that feeling is rooted in. And for both of us today, the story we told ourselves is, it's not fair that it's not sunny. It was supposed to be sunny today. Sunny days are better than cloudy days. And on and on and on and on. None of that is true, but they're stories that we cling to. So there's an opportunity to dive into those stories every single day during this pandemic. And once we master that, then it becomes our way of being.
Yeah, there's something about the acceptance piece. You know, it's interesting because as soon as you let go of what you think things are supposed to be, and you go back into the potential of, you know, that nothingness, that field of opportunity and possibility. I mean, as you can see, it's sunny now. You know, and so it worked out. But in your case, and I'm thinking about your story, and I know that there's going to be people that feel this. I mean, there's this belief that says that things come in threes. And in your case, it came in threes pretty good in terms of your little circle. And so when you start to bring your head out of the water and you're starting to think good things and you're feeling wonderful and you're realizing that, hey, it's my belief system and I can choose to feel better. And then you're just pulled right back down again. And then again, it's hard to tell yourself that path of thinking positively and looking at the sun in a different way, it's hard. And I want to acknowledge that you know that, you understand that. That's what makes you so good at what you do in terms of a life coach and your purpose and your mission. And so there's two thoughts here. One is when a person's in that place, all the more reason to feel, I would imagine, is what you're going to say. And then what to do with it if they keep getting pulled down again and again and again. What opportunities are there?
So I believe that words have power. And, you know, during a good moment when I'm occupying my body, you know, and really, really present, I pay attention to the words that come out of my mouth and the words that come out of other people's mouths. And I pay attention to how that feels in my body. This was a gift I received a couple of years ago. But this notion that my body is my God-given barometer that recognizes truth. I love that. And you said the word positively.
Mm-hmm.
I don't use that word. I would never call myself a positive thinker, you know, or I don't even use the word affirmations because of because of the story that I've created around those two. But what really resonates with me is peaceful. I mean, peaceful. I'm looking for a peaceful thought. I'm looking for a peaceful story. I'm looking for opportunities to create peace inside of me. All right, having said that, the first step is honoring the place I'm in. Being aware of and honoring the place I'm in. I love this, hold on. So in my first book, what I did was I named, honored, and thanked the authors out there that were my greatest teachers, you know, when I pulled this together in 2015. And I shared the most important quote that I could pull from them. So Eckhart Tolle, the author of The Power of Now, the fact is that you are resisting what is You are making the present moment into an enemy. Oh, Lord, I hated that. I hated that quote because it was so true. I was like, you bet I'm resisting what is. You bet I am making the present moment my enemy, and that is creating more and more and more pain. Being aware of that is the first step. So what I would try to do, and this is what I would suggest to anyone, when the pain is absolutely intolerable, I mean, it's seemingly unbearable, can you honor it? Can you be with it? Can you witness it? Can you hold it? Can you breathe with it and breathe through it? And can you remind yourself that every energy that's running through your body has a beginning and a middle and an end. And when I resist it, I'm holding on to it, and it's going to stay longer. But when I honor it, it will begin, it will have its middle, and it will end, and it will be replaced by something else. Does that make sense?
It does. And I love that you mentioned the positive, because my own belief system, and again, it's beliefs, my own belief system is that if we're always in the positive, we're kind of in denial because we're human and not everything about life is positive. And you even look at the science of things, there are negative and positive in terms of protons and neutrons, and there's a reason for the negative. The earth is a negative charge. And so we need that negativity sometimes to be able to be grounded and rooted and in reality, and then that vulnerable place so we can transform. And the transformational piece, the emotions that you're talking about, I love also that as you shared them, I could feel how soft that was. I could feel how self-nurturing that was. In no way did you say, force it. In no way did you say, wrestle with it, move through it quickly, make it difficult, make it hard,
We get to ask ourselves this question over and over again. As a result of what I'm experiencing right now, who would I like to become? I'm being transformed, like I said, and I want to consciously participate in that. If I'm unconscious to the transformation, there's a really good chance I'm going to become bitter and angry and closed off and hopeless. That is not who I want to become. I want to become more gentle. That starts with being gentle to me. I want to be kinder and more compassionate and more loving. And when we pay attention, we can kind of gauge where people are, because the way they treat us, the way a person treats me, that's a reflection of the way they treat themselves. So if someone is bitter and angry and short with me, they're living in their own self-created hell. I'm not judging that, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's not the path of peace that I'm interested in. I think it's actually a gift. I mean, being aware of that is a gift, because then you can look for a door to move out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to have mercy on ourselves. We have to be really kind and gentle.
Yeah, one of the things that I know that you've been doing for the last month or so is you've been doing a lot of lives for your social media group, and I was able to share one of them recently, and that was around this idea of feeling abandoned when you're in that place. And when we're in this really yucky place, when we're in, I say yucky, but I don't mean it like that. Don't take it too literal. But when we're in this place of discomfort and we are moving into that transformational, just like a birth. It can be messy. And that place of transformation can make other people uncomfortable, in the same way that when someone is having a baby, you know, people are, oh, woozy of the blood and the mess, and right, there's a birth about to happen, or the screaming and pain. There's a lot of people, as you mentioned recently in one of your lives, there's a lot of people that they can't hold the space when you're there. They don't know how, they're not capable, and or they're not willing. And so when nobody around you is really holding the space for you in the way that you want them to, what do you do, Tom? What do you do?
I take a really, really deep breath, and I consciously create that space for myself. And this is what everybody wants, every human being. We want to be seen, and we want to be heard, and we want to be honored exactly as we are in this moment. And when I'm conscious, I can give that to myself. And for me, based on my belief systems, I can remind myself that even though it feels like I'm alone, I'm not really alone. I mean, I'm not really alone. I'm never really, really alone. We've been taught to avoid the darkness at all costs. There are gifts in that darkness. There are gifts in that pain. And for me, on a good day, the God that I believe in, the higher power that I believe in, is very, very, very close to me, holding me literally in those darkest moments. Having said that, it's really important to honor the fact that there's nothing easy about it. It is hard, often lonely work. That's one of the beauties of social media. In 1990, I didn't have the resources that are available to us today. Mm-hmm. Sitting in my home by myself, there are so many resources I can access online that will help me not feel as alone.
One of the things that you said was, you talked about the story we tell ourselves and the thought process and how that can spin us out at times. So I want to understand, when a person is in this place of moving through their feelings, and the feelings are coming in and they're stuck in a story of, you know, my child died, or, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get my wedding, or I'm going through a divorce, or whatever that story is that keeps wanting to repeat itself, and that thought process keeps coming in again and again and again. Where is the fine line, or the transformational pivotal point? I'm not sure how to call it, but between the ruminating in the old versus the allowing things to be, so that you don't get stuck and you can actually move through the rebirthing process without suffering?
I think it's important to have a conversation with every single one of those beliefs that you just presented, and that may be going around and around in someone's head. My child died. What does that actually mean? Tell me more about that. Maybe the person would say, you know, I'll never be able to communicate with my child again. And I would say, is that true? I'll never see my child again. Is that true? Do you really, really believe that? Do you know that for sure? I'm not able to have my wedding. Ever? Or are you postponing it? Let's dive into it. Tell me about the other person that's going to be at the wedding. Tell me about that person. Oh, you're really, really in love? Oh my God, how blessed you are. There are ways we can expand it. to come to a place of peace. So many people think, they've latched on to this, no parent should have to bury their child. Really? According to who? I mean, I did some research, and up until the turn of the last century, 50% of children under the age of 12 died. It's so unnatural. It's so unnatural. Well, apparently it's not. It's very natural. Through the expansion of modern medicine, more and more children live now. So we have to be really, really careful of what it is we're, clinging to, what we're defending. But this is true, this is true, this is true. Well, maybe not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. That whole surrender piece. It's so huge.
And surrender doesn't mean giving up. I'm not suggesting that anyone give up, but surrender is very, very powerful.
So let's talk just for a moment about the pandemic in terms of the grief process, in terms of what's going on right now and how it compares to the loss of a loved one. What are you noticing in just, in your circle with people, and how there's similarities?
So we're both teachers and we're both students. And you said the word compares. This fire starts burning inside of me, because there is nothing gained by comparing, I don't think. For the person who lost their job, that may be the most devastating, horrible, undescribable pain that person has ever experienced. For the person who's afraid that they might lose their job, based on their life experiences, that may be the worst thing. So it's important that I honor all of it. For the woman or the man that I just referenced, who they were going to get married June 2nd, and that's not going to happen. That could be absolutely devastating. I mean, send them into a depression. So we start by honoring it, and then be really, really honest. What is that bringing up inside of me? I'm anxious. I can't sleep. I'm eating all the time. I'm nervous. I'm scared. I'm lonely. I'm terrorized. Whatever it is, begin to name what is happening inside. And what I've found is when we do that, there's something really comforting about it, because regardless of the cause, if I can bring 5 people together, they'll go, yeah, I'm feeling that too. Oh, you? Oh, me too. But it's my wedding and it's your job. But that's part of being human. So, I think that we have so much more in common in that human experience of grief than we realize. And that's a good thing.
It is. And I definitely, I remember you giving a lot of people permission to be in their own unique space, because we are all different. And I love that you talked about the comparison piece the way that you did. It's definitely important. And where I'm being led to go next is, sometimes when people are in grief, now this is my own experience having worked with people the way that I have, is they stay stuck in grief. They stay stuck in a certain timeline of grief, where they stay so caught up in the moment of the person's death or the event that wasn't happening, or what they thought was supposed to be. An example would be, you lost a child, you lost a spouse, you lost a parent, and you keep remembering. You go into the room and you remember them as they were. You remember their smell, you remember their sound, you remember whatever. And my experience as an intuitive medium is that's lovely. That can be a wonderful path or gateway to get you to where they are now. But your departed loved one is not in that same frequency. They're not in that same vibration anymore. And so when we communicate our feelings and we express ourselves in a way that allows those feelings to say, hey, I'm experiencing that same thing, though my story's different. There's commonality that occurs. And that's beautiful in some cases. Again, I don't want to judge it, but where I've seen that people can get stuck is if they stay there, if they hang on to that feeling, that memory, that emotion, and it takes them out of the now. So can you speak to that a little bit?
So this is relatively new for me too, this awareness. And it feels really, really true to me that wherever you are, wherever you find yourself today, and if up until today you label that as stuck, or if someone else decided that you were stuck, that was the place you had to land in. That was the place you had to rest in order to survive. So what I'm trying to do is shift the energy a little bit and not use the word stuck. Oh, this is where you are. This is where you've been. Thank goodness, because that brought you to this moment. And now, if you allow me, I'll sit on the bench next to you, or, put your hand in my hand, and we're going to take one gentle step forward. Do you know it's possible to take one gentle step forward? Yeah, but I'm really, really afraid. Let's honor that. I'm going to sit here, while you breathe and while I breathe. Do you know there's another way of looking at this? Do you think you can open your heart a little bit more? Can you expand your thinking a little bit more? I think, and, I would add, do you think you've suffered enough? I mean, I've had this conversation with many people and they'll say, no, I don't. And then I'll say, okay, how much longer do you think you should suffer? A month? 6 months? 5 years? How much longer do you want to suffer? And if they're honest, they'll say, I don't. I don't. So it's this very gentle, like we're turning on a light and letting people know, oh, there's another way to do this. Most people don't know.
Yes. And it's from my experience that some people get addicted to that suffering, so much so that it becomes their only way of being. And until someone else points out that other passageway. Yeah.
And if it's the death, if we're talking about the death of someone that they love, I very, very frequently say, okay, let's ask John to sit in this chair. So it's me, you, and John. And let's ask John directly, how much longer does he want you to suffer? Is he suffering now? John, how many times did you leave your physical body? Once. Mary, how many times have you relived that event? He died once. How many times have you killed him? 10 times a day? The light bulbs go, oh.
And I can see how this is happening again and again and again with this pandemic, with this idea of what might happen, what might occur. So instead of maybe reliving someone's death, they're projecting into the future a fear of what might happen, which is sort of it in reverse, or a different way of looking at it. Yet again, how helpful is it?
Yeah. I think I don't think, I know, big, big, big time, the universe is saying to us, which space would you like to live in? Would you like to live in a space of love, or would you like to live in a space of fear? I mean, I can feel the heaviness of the fear in the air that's surrounding us. That's painful. Goes back to, my choice of peace or pain. So for me, and I'll be honest, I'll be vulnerable. A friend of mine said, Tom, you're going through withdrawal. I am going through withdrawal from watching the news, It is not healthy for me to watch the news. It doesn't make me feel good to watch the news. But it's like the television is calling me, just 5 minutes. 5 minutes isn't going to hurt. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's the same for me, like with scrolling through Facebook. I don't want to read about the political arguments. I do and I don't. I do and I don't. So it's this internal struggle. But the invitation is make a decision, buddy. Peace or pain, love or fear.
Yes, and I love that you also gave permission to do both if that's what we feel called to do, and then choose where you choose to be once you've had your choices. Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, it's not a one-time decision. I mean, it's like keeps pulling me in. Yeah, absolutely.
I knew this was going to be a deep, beautiful call, and it is. And I just want to give you the opportunity to say anything else that you feel called to say, because I know we're getting toward the end. So
I think this is a really, really important time for all of us. We are being transformed. We are being changed individually and collectively. And we can choose a peaceful path, a loving path, or we can choose a painful, fear-based path. And as you said, I'm glad you said it, it is a good place to end. I promise you, I'm not Pollyanna. It's hard, particularly at the beginning. In the beginning, for some people, is 6 months or 6 years or 60 years. It's hard. It's really, really hard. So we have to be kind and gentle and loving with ourselves. But this is what we were born for. This is why we're here right now. This isn't a coincidence. This isn't an accident. This is a great, great invitation to become who we came to this planet to be. And it's easier to become that together, as opposed to, it's so ironic, as opposed to being isolated and separate.
yes. Yes. Thank you so much. This was just beautiful. It was exquisitely divine. I appreciate your time and your love and your experience so that we can learn through you and with you. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I hope we touch a lot of hearts and we help people become who they came here to be.
Thank you. Namaste, everybody. Make it a great day. Be well. Stay safe.
Take care.